The screaming began at exactly 8:17 a.m. The instant Ava Langford realized her prized white Mercedes was being hauled away by a tow truck while half the street watched and filmed. 3 hours earlier, that same woman had taken a crowbar to my brand new Camaro. The sickening shatter of safety glass, the metallic rasp across paint I'd earned 2 years of overtime to afford. $40,000 of dreams turned into a scatter of glittering shards in my driveway. But here's what that HOA tyrant didn't know. While she was busy destroying my car, I was busy dismantling her entire world. Bank records, forged invoices, embezzled association funds. I had it all. And in exactly 12 minutes, the police were going to arrest her for felony fraud. What would you do if some power-drunk Karen wrecked everything you'd built? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I need to know how far this justice story travels because what happened next changed our whole community forever. Let me back up and explain how this whole nightmare began. My name is Marcus, and 6 months ago I was just a regular man trying to rebuild his life after the worst year of my existence. 52 years old, recently divorced, working as an electrician in suburban Dallas while my ex-wife got the house, the dog, and half my retirement savings. After splitting everything down the middle, I scraped together enough to buy a modest ranch home in Willowbrook Estates, one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where every lawn looks the same and everyone pretends to be friends. I thought it would be peaceful. I thought wrong. The first thing I bought with what was left of my settlement money was my dream car, a 2024 Camaro SS in rally red that cost me $40,000. Every penny I had left. I'll never forget that first drive home. Windows down, the smell of fresh leather mixing with Texas heat, that 450 horsepower V8 engine rumbling like controlled thunder beneath my feet. For the first time since my divorce papers were signed, I felt like myself again. That euphoria lasted exactly 3 days. Enter Vanessa Crowe, our self-appointed neighborhood dictator. Picture a woman who looked like she'd been manufactured in a suburban mom factory. A perfectly styled blonde bob that never moved in the wind, business casual outfits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and a white Mercedes she treated like a shrine. Her house squatted at the end of our cul-de-sac like a monument to her ego, the biggest, most ostentatious property in the development, with a lawn so perfect it looked like green carpet installed by obsessive-compulsive robots. Vanessa had been HOA president for 6 years, and she ran our little community like her personal fiefdom. The harassment started immediately. Day 4 in my new home, I found a citation in my mailbox. My black mailbox apparently violated aesthetic standards. I needed a brown one to maintain neighborhood harmony. The replacement cost me $89 for a piece of metal that did the exact same job. Then came the lawn violations. Every Tuesday morning, like clockwork, I'd hear the sharp snap of paper being shoved into my mailbox. My grass was 3/4 of an inch too tall. $25 fine. My driveway had oil stains from my work truck. $50 fine. My garden hose wasn't properly stored. Another $25. I could feel the bitterness rising in my throat every time I saw her perfect silhouette watching me from her kitchen window, arms crossed, that smug smile playing on her lips like she was enjoying a private joke at my expense. But when she targeted my Camaro, that's when the real war began. "That vehicle is inappropriate for our community standards," she announced at my first HOA board meeting, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. The community center smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry wasps. Vanessa presided over the meeting from behind a folding table like a judge passing sentence. 4 other board members flanked her, middle-aged suburban drones who nodded along with everything she said like bobblehead dolls programmed for agreement. "We maintain certain aesthetic expectations here in Willowbrook Estates," she continued, her cold blue eyes fixed on me like laser sights. "Sports cars project an undesirable image. Undesirable image. My legally parked car in my own driveway was somehow offensive to her delicate sensibilities. The citation she handed me carried a $200 fine and a threat to place a lien on my property if I didn't remedy the situation. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. reading every page of our HOA covenants. Coffee turned cold in my mug as I cross-referenced parking regulations with enforcement procedures. What I discovered made my blood boil. Vanessa was selectively enforcing rules that didn't even exist in our original documents. Armed with evidence, I returned to the next meeting. The room felt smaller, more hostile, thick with the tension of impending confrontation. I presented my research calmly, logically, showing how her citations violated our own governing documents. Vanessa listened with the patience of a predator watching wounded prey struggle. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and delivered the line that changed everything. Some people just don't understand that rules exist for a reason, Marcus. Perhaps you'd be happier in a different type of neighborhood. The racial undertone hung in the air like smoke. The board voted 4-1 to uphold every citation. That's when I realized this wasn't about parking or aesthetics. This was about power, control, and putting the undesirable new resident in his place. Vanessa Crowe had just declared war on the wrong electrician. 1 week after that humiliating board meeting, I walked out to my driveway and felt my heart drop into my stomach. Deep, deliberate scratches ran along the entire driver's side of my Camaro. Jagged gouges that cut through the paint down to bare metal like angry scars across red skin. The morning air should have carried the sweet scent of honeysuckle from my neighbor's fence, but all I could smell was the metallic tang of destroyed dreams and the bitter taste of pure rage rising in my throat. Someone had taken a key or screwdriver and dragged it from headlight to taillight with surgical precision. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a declaration of war. I called the police, fighting to keep my voice steady, as Officer Martinez filled out his report with the enthusiasm of someone documenting a parking ticket. "Probably kids," he said, though the calculated nature of the damage screamed otherwise. "No witnesses, no cameras, nothing we can do." The repair estimate made me physically sick. $2,800 to fix damage that my insurance deductible wouldn't even touch. But Vanessa had just made her first critical mistake. She'd underestimated a divorced electrician with nothing left to lose, 20 years of troubleshooting experience, and far too much time on his hands. That evening, while installing security lighting for a nervous homeowner across town, a job that taught me how motion sensors and camera angles work together, I got a text from my next-door neighbor, Margaret Hensley. Margaret was 73, lived alone since her husband died, and had the sharpest eyes in the neighborhood. Her message was brief but loaded. "Can you come over? Need to tell you something important." Margaret's living room smelled like lavender potpourri and old secrets. She pulled the curtains closed before sitting me down with trembling hands. "I saw who scratched your car, honey," she whispered, glancing toward her window like Vanessa might be listening through the walls. It was around midnight. Vanessa's boy, Travis. That 17-year-old was skulking around your driveway with something metal in his hand, looking around like he was afraid of getting caught. My blood pressure spiked so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Will you testify to that?" Margaret's face crumpled like wet tissue paper. "I can't, Marcus. She'll destroy me." Last month, she cited Mrs. Peterson for excessive bird feeders, exactly 1 week after Peterson questioned the landscaping expenses at a board meeting. Peterson's house has a for sale sign now. The pattern crystallized in my mind like a perfect electrical circuit diagram. Vanessa eliminated threats by making their lives unbearable until they fled. But unlike Margaret, unlike Peterson, unlike whoever else had been crushed under her suburban boot, I wasn't going anywhere. While Vanessa probably thought she'd scared me into submission, I was already planning my counterattack. See, 20 years of troubleshooting electrical problems teaches you something valuable. When someone tries to cut your power, you don't just fix the damage, you upgrade the entire system. The next morning, I drove to Best Buy and bought the most sophisticated dashcam system they sold. Front and rear cameras with motion activation, night vision, and cloud backup. From my electrical work, I knew motion-activated cameras on your own property are legal in Texas, and the footage holds up in court as long as they don't point directly into neighbors' windows. My divorce lawyer had hammered that lesson into my head during the custody battle. Document everything, Marcus. Your word against theirs means nothing without proof. I spent the weekend running electrical lines and installing the system with the same precision I used on commercial jobs. The satisfying metallic click of screwdrivers against mounting brackets felt like loading ammunition for the war ahead. Each camera was invisible from the street but captured every angle of my driveway in crystal clear 4K resolution. Vanessa's response came Monday morning like clockwork. A city code enforcement officer sporting the same last name, Brad Crow, probably some inbred cousin, knocked on my door with a clipboard and the dead-eyed expression of someone doing family favors. "Got a complaint about surveillance equipment violating neighbors' privacy," he drawled. I walked him around my property, pointing out exactly where each camera faced. All on my land, all aimed at my vehicles, nothing pointing at neighbors' windows. Brad couldn't find a single violation but promised to monitor the situation. "I'll be back when Vanessa tells me to be." That afternoon brought the real intelligence breakthrough. Margaret called, her voice shaking with nervous energy. "There's something else, honey." 3 other families moved out in the past 2 years after Vanessa targeted them. The Hendersons, the Washingtons, and that young couple with the baby, the Garcias. The systematic harassment followed the same playbook every time. Sudden violations for microscopic infractions, anonymous complaints to city services, insurance companies mysteriously receiving safety reports about their properties. Challenge Vanessa's authority and face escalating torment until fleeing became the only escape. "But here's the crucial part," Margaret whispered. The previous treasurer, Eldon Pierce, tried questioning expenses before he moved. Vanessa buried him under roof structural violations that 3 different contractors said were complete fabrications. My electrician's brain started connecting the real circuit here. Vanessa wasn't just drunk on power. She was covering up something big enough to ruin lives over. Eldon had tried to expose her before. I filed a police report, contacted the state attorney general, even reached out to local news. That's when the real harassment started. Suddenly, my roof needed $30,000 in emergency structural repairs, according to inspectors she brought in. My homeowner's insurance got mysteriously canceled after anonymous reports about foundation problems that didn't exist. The woman was running a criminal enterprise from her HOA throne, using community authority like a medieval weapon to crush anyone who threatened her income stream. But she'd made one fatal error. She targeted someone with nothing left to lose and the technical skills to document everything. Eldon slid the complete evidence package across the table. I kept copies of everything: bank records, fraudulent invoices, correspondence with contractors who never stepped foot on our property. I had no idea my new cameras were about to record something that would flip this entire war on its head. 3 nights later, my phone lit up with motion alerts at 2:17 a.m. Half asleep and expecting to see a raccoon, I opened the live feed and nearly dropped my phone. There, crouched beside my Camaro like some deranged suburban goblin, was Vanessa Crow herself. Not a rebellious kid, not some random vandal. The HOA president was methodically carving lines into my rear quarter panel with a landscaping edger from the community shed. Her manicured hands gripped the handle, her $200 athleisure outfit gleamed under the streetlight, and that gaudy diamond ring on her finger caught the glow as she worked with unsettling precision. The metallic scraping echoed faintly through my window like nails on a chalkboard. Every gouge was intentional, calculated to cause the most expensive repair possible. And she was smiling as she mutilated thousands of dollars worth of custom paintwork. Every part of me wanted to storm outside and drag her away from my car by that perfect blonde bob, but my divorce lawyer's voice echoed in my head. "Emotion destroys evidence, Marcus. Stay calm. Document everything." So I stayed still, recording every second as this 50-year-old suburban psychopath committed a felony on camera with all the grace of a sociopath in yoga pants. The footage was ironclad, but there was one problem. Local cops hated handling neighbor feuds, especially when the accused was friends with half the city council and sponsored their summer barbecue. I needed nuclear-level evidence before making my move. The next afternoon, the escalation arrived wrapped in bureaucracy. A certified letter from the HOA. Emergency violation. Notice: unauthorized vehicle modifications detected. Aftermarket exhaust system violates community noise ordinances per section 4.7b. Vehicle must be returned to factory specifications or permanently removed within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in professional towing at owner's expense. The audacity was breathtaking. She was literally trying to steal my car through paperwork after vandalizing it the night before. But while Vanessa thought she was tightening her trap, I was about to find the detonator that would blow her entire empire apart. That evening, Margaret showed up at my door looking both terrified and determined. "There's someone you need to meet," she whispered. "Eldon Pierce is back in town, and he's been waiting for someone like you." We met Eldon at a shabby coffee shop on the outskirts of the town, the kind that smelled like over-roasted beans and conspiracy theories. Eldon looked worn down, a gaunt man in his 60s who'd clearly been carrying the burden of terrible knowledge for years. "She didn't just steal from the HOA," he said, his hands trembling as he opened a thick manila folder. "Vanessa Crowe has been running a full-blown embezzlement scheme for 3 years. Fake invoices, shell companies, equipment purchases that never existed. Minimum $45,000 gone." My blood ran cold as he spread documents across the table. Bank statements, forged contractor bills, payments to companies that existed only on paper. The most damning page was a business registration for Willowbrook Maintenance Solutions, filed under Vanessa's maiden name, Vanessa Monroe, using her home address as the corporate headquarters. "Every month, she funnels between $500 and $2,000 through fake landscaping contracts," Eldon continued. "The timing matches her Mercedes payments exactly. She's been financing her luxury lifestyle with stolen community money." The more I read, the angrier I got. Eldon had tried to expose her years ago, filing reports with police, state investigators, even local media. But each time, Vanessa struck back harder. Roof violations, bogus repairs, canceled insurance. She'd turned every system into a weapon. She wasn't just an HOA tyrant. She was a criminal mastermind hiding behind bylaws. Eldon leaned forward, voice shaking but resolute. "I kept everything. Copies of every record, every fraudulent transfer. I've been waiting for someone strong enough to finish what I started." That night, I laid all the evidence across my kitchen table beneath the harsh fluorescent light. Vanessa had built a suburban crime empire under everyone's noses, but she just handed me the key to her downfall. The next morning, she expected to find my Camaro gone, towed, destroyed, erased. Instead, she was about to watch her world implode on live television. My garage had turned into a war room that could have impressed federal agents. The cold concrete floor was scattered with papers, invoices, and legal documents like a battlefield of truth waiting to strike. Eldon's financial statements lined my workbench. Rico's towing invoices were taped to my tool cabinets like maps of an enemy fortress. The air was thick with the scent of oil, toner, and retribution. Margaret arrived at dawn carrying coffee strong enough to wake the dead, her face etched with the resolve of someone who'd decided fear was no longer an option. "I called every family Vanessa targeted," she said, setting the cups down with purpose. 15 households are ready to testify. People aren't afraid anymore, Marcus. They're angry." Eldon shuffled in next, clutching a briefcase full of evidence. His hand still trembled, but his voice had found steel. "I brought everything: bank statements, canceled checks, and even letters from the state investigators who ignored me because Vanessa had friends in the right places." The door opened again, and in walked our secret weapon, attorney Sarah Kim. A legal powerhouse from Dallas, she had a reputation for eating corrupt HOA boards alive. Her first words made every sleepless night worth it. "This is the most detailed HOA fraud case I've ever seen," she said, flipping through our evidence with laser precision. "We're not talking about minor violations here. This is federal racketeering." Sarah's strategy was surgical. "We'll hit from 4 sides: criminal charges through federal prosecutors, civil suits for treble damages, licensing complaints to destroy her real estate career, and public exposure through the media." The coordination was perfect. Rico, who owned the towing company Vanessa had scammed, set up a surveillance hub in my garage corner. 4K cameras, directional mics, and even a drone for overhead shots. "My insurance requires video proof for disputed tows," he explained, adjusting the tripod. "Tomorrow, everything gets recorded in broadcast quality." We backed up every file to multiple cloud drives, each one mirrored in 3 different states. Vanessa couldn't bury this truth even if she set the neighborhood on fire. Eldon taught me how to spot the accounting tricks she used, how she mixed reserve funds with operational accounts, an automatic violation of fiduciary duty. He smiled grimly. "Most HOA corruption survives because homeowners don't know their rights. She's been counting on ignorance. Rico shared insider knowledge about towing regulations that made my jaw tighten. Legally, every tow requires a 72-hour notice and clear signage. Most of what she's done is vehicle theft dressed up as policy. He wasn't exaggerating. Vanessa had orchestrated a dozen illegal tows using his company's name while pocketing the payments. She's about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong small business, he said, grinning like a man about to collect his dues. By 2 a.m., every witness had been briefed, every file secured, every angle covered. Sarah had already tipped off Channel 8's Emmy-winning investigative reporter, Lisa Martinez. She'll arrive at 8:30 sharp with her camera crew, Sarah explained. HOA corruption stories get huge ratings, especially when there's clear video and a villain in heels. The plan was flawless. Morning rush hour meant neighbors, parents, and kids would all be outside. The perfect audience for a public reckoning. When the first light of dawn crept through my blinds, I finally allowed myself a small smile. Tomorrow, Willowbrook Estates would witness the downfall of a tyrant. Vanessa Crow's kingdom of fear was about to collapse. One document, one camera flash, and one handcuff click at a time. At 6:30 a.m., I stood at my kitchen window watching the empire of Vanessa Crow begin to crumble. She stepped out of her oversized house wearing a white bathrobe that probably cost more than my mortgage, her expression tight with confusion as she spotted Rico's massive tow truck parked legally at the curb. The diesel engine rumbled like a beast waiting for release, and her face twisted with disbelief. She started pacing her driveway, phone glued to her ear, shouting orders to whoever still answered her calls. Within 20 minutes, 4 board members rushed into her house, summoned for an emergency meeting. Margaret's text streamed in. They're arguing. Someone mentioned missing money. Voices raised. The dominoes were falling exactly on schedule. By 7:15, Vanessa reappeared in full battle mode, dressed in a crisp beige business suit and clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she marched toward Rico's truck. "You need to move this vehicle right now," she demanded, her voice dripping with the kind of authority that only existed in her imagination. Rico climbed out calmly, wiping his hands on his work pants. "Ma'am, I'm parked on a public street and here to collect payment for unpaid invoices. 18 months worth, totaling $3,800. Each one signed by you." Her expression flickered from outrage to panic. "That's impossible," she stammered. "Our treasurer handles all that." Rico opened his folder and pulled out copies of every invoice, each bearing her signature in perfect pen strokes. "Funny," he said evenly, "because your HOA bank records show payments to another company, Crow Towing Solutions. Know anything about that?" The color drained from her face instantly. Right on cue, Officer Ramirez pulled up in his patrol car, responding to what was no doubt Vanessa's 911 call claiming harassment. He stepped out, the same cop who had taken my vandalism report earlier in the week, looking resigned to yet another Willowbrook drama. "Morning, folks," he said flatly. "Got a call about a disturbance. What's going on here?" Vanessa snapped into performance mode. "Officer, this man is harassing me and refusing to leave. He's making threats about money we don't owe." Rico handed over the thick documentation packet with the composure of a man who'd done his homework. "Everything's here, officer. Unpaid invoices, forged records, and proof of fraud." Ramirez flipped through the papers, his eyebrows rising as he realized this was bigger than some towing dispute. That's when the reinforcements arrived. Margaret, Eldon, and 3 other residents who'd suffered under Vanessa's reign. They approached together like witnesses marching into court. "Officer," Margaret said clearly, "we have more evidence. Embezzlement, insurance fraud, years of harassment." Ramirez's tone shifted from weary to alert. He started calling for detectives. Vanessa stood frozen, her composure cracking as her victims surrounded her with the truth. And then, like fate itself intervening, the sound of a news van engine echoed down the street. Channel 8's crew arrived, cameras already rolling. Lisa Martinez stepped out, microphone in hand, her confident stride slicing through the chaos. "Mrs. Crow," she called out, "would you like to comment on allegations that you've embezzled over $75,000 in community funds?" The look on Vanessa's face was priceless. Shock, denial, and the unmistakable realization that her life was over. Neighbors poured out of their homes, phones raised, filming every moment. Parents waiting for the school bus whispered to each other, their expressions a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. The cul-de-sac that once lived in fear now buzzed with electric anticipation. And just when Vanessa tried to pivot the narrative, crying about harassment, blaming everyone else, Eldon stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "I have 3 years of bank statements proving systematic theft," he told the cameras. "This woman ruined lives to hide her crimes." Lisa's microphone caught every word. The crowd gasped as he laid out the evidence for the world to see. At 8 o'clock sharp, Officer Ramirez made the call into dispatch. "We need federal investigators at Willowbrook Estates. Possible mail fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy." Vanessa's knees nearly buckled, but the coup de grace came seconds later. Rico climbed back into his truck, his voice amplified over the engine. "Ma'am, your vehicle is subject to immediate impoundment for unpaid liens totaling $4,200. The metal hook clamped onto her white Mercedes with the heavy finality of justice itself. As her luxury car lifted off the ground, Vanessa let out a sound that was half scream, half broken sob. The neighborhood erupted in applause, decades of fear evaporating into cheers. By the time federal agents arrived, it was all over. Vanessa's carefully constructed world of lies and intimidation had collapsed in broad daylight, recorded from every angle. Officer Ramirez read her rights aloud as she stood in front of her neighbors, handcuffed, shaking, and humiliated. The same woman who'd ruled through fines and threats was being led past her own stolen car, now dangling from the back of a tow truck. I turned toward the cameras and said, "This is what happens when people stand together, when bullies get exposed for what they are." The crowd cheered louder, the sound of freedom replacing years of silence. 6 months later, I sat in my driveway under the warm Texas sun, watching kids ride bikes along the quiet cul-de-sac where chaos once ruled. The neighborhood had transformed completely. Gone were the fearful glances, the whispered complaints, the constant anxiety of waking up to new fines or threats. In their place was laughter, conversation, and the sound of normal life returning. For the first time since I'd moved to Willowbrook Estates, peace wasn't a fantasy, it was our new reality. Vanessa Crow's sentencing had been nothing short of poetic. Federal Judge Patricia Williams didn't hold back as she handed down the verdict. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years of probation, and full restitution, $127,000, including stolen funds, legal fees, and penalties. The courtroom was packed with neighbors who'd once trembled at the sound of her name. Watching her led away in an orange jumpsuit instead of her designer suits felt like the closing chapter of a long nightmare. There would be no country club confinement, no leniency. She'd serve real time in a real federal facility. For the first time in her privileged life, Vanessa was truly powerless. The recovery of our community finances was even more satisfying. When investigators froze her accounts, they discovered not just the stolen funds but years of accrued interest she'd been too arrogant to spend. The sale of her house at auction covered additional damages and financed long overdue improvements to our neighborhood, repaved roads, a new playground, fresh landscaping, and the revival of our community center. My Camaro, once a shattered symbol of helplessness, now gleamed brighter than ever after a complete restoration funded by a neighborhood drive that raised double the repair costs. The surplus money went into a homeowner legal defense fund, ensuring no future HOA president could ever weaponize power against residents again. The new HOA board was everything the old one wasn't: transparent, honest, and community-driven. Eldon was unanimously elected as treasurer, his first order of business to implement quarterly audits and public reports. Every board meeting was live-streamed, every financial statement published online for all to see. Margaret became our unofficial neighborhood historian, documenting everything from Vanessa's downfall to the rebuilding of trust. She even landed a book deal about HOA corruption and suburban justice, a story that, according to early buzz, was already attracting national attention. Rico's towing business became legendary after his role in exposing the fraud went viral. Honest contractors across Texas lined up to work with him, knowing he stood for integrity. Sarah Kim, our fearless attorney, became a household name in legal circles. Her victory in the Willowbrook case set precedents that were cited in HOA reform legislation across 3 states. Thanks to her, the Willowbrook Act was passed, requiring financial transparency reports, conflict of interest disclosures, and background checks for all HOA board candidates. It was more than a legal win. It was a movement. Each year since the case, we've celebrated what we now call the Community Freedom Festival. Food trucks line the street, kids play in bounce houses, and live bands perform under banners that read "Unity over Fear." The event doubles as a fundraiser for the Willowbrook Legal Aid Scholarship, a fund that helps low-income families fight HOA abuse. This year alone, we raised $15,000. The program operates out of what was once Eldon's old house, now repurposed as our community center. Where Vanessa once ruled through fear, children now laugh and play, their joy echoing through the same streets that once carried her tyranny. But the most meaningful change was personal. My small electrical business had grown faster than I ever imagined, thanks to neighbors who trusted me completely. I'd become the person people called when corruption crept into their communities. Just yesterday, I got a call from a frightened homeowner 2 counties over. Their HOA board had begun targeting families with fake violations and suspicious repair fees. The woman's voice trembled with fear but carried a spark of hope. "I heard what happened in Willowbrook," she said. "Can you help us?" I looked out at the kids laughing, at Margaret tending her flower beds without fear of fines, at the clean, shining surface of my restored Camaro, and smiled. "We're on our way," I told her. Because some fights are worth having. Some victories are meant to be shared. If you've ever been trapped under the thumb of an HOA tyrant, share your story in the comments. Our network is growing stronger every day. And don't forget to subscribe for more true tales of justice, resilience, and revenge against corruption. Sometimes David doesn't just defeat Goliath. He inspires an army of slingshot warriors ready to take down every giant standing in their way.